Hi, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Finding Jesus in Genesis chapter 7, verse 24, all the way through chapter 8, verse 22. If you have not read that yet, go on ahead and pause this video and we'll wait for you until you come back. Welcome back. If you'd like a memory verse, we're going to use Genesis chapter 8, verse 16 that says, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives." So at this point in Genesis, the entire planet has been flooded. It's been 150 days in total since the water burst forth from below and above, and God has sent the Ruach over the water-laden planet. And this is an eerily familiar scene, though, isn't it? Let me remind you of where we started. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, we're told, quote, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." The Hebrew word for spirit there is ruach, and it is typically translated as spirit or wind or even breath. But note this significant point: in almost every instance that it is used, the ruach is miraculous, and it comes from God. Its origins are both divine and heavenly in nature. It is, in essence, physical evidence of God's presence. In Genesis chapter 8, verse 1, we read, quote, "But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark, and God caused ruach, a wind, to pass over the earth, and the water subsided." The Creator is replaying the original Genesis of the world. The reset switch has been pressed, and once again, the planet has no visible landmass, only water as far as the eye can see, and now the presence of God is passing over the earth to inaugurate this newly restored creation. By the 150th day after the flood began, the floodwaters have begun to recede to the point where the bottom of the ark has come to rest in the mountain range known as Ararat. 2.5 months later, on day 224, the water has gone down so much that the tops of the mountains are visible, and Noah has not yet exited the confines of the ark itself, and the only window does not really allow him to peer over the sides of the enormous ship to see the ground around him yet. 40 days later, 264 days after the first drop of rain, Noah acts. Now, we aren't sure why he waited another 40 days. Maybe it's because the number 40 is symbolic and it is Noah's time of testing and trial. That's typically what the number 40 means in the Bible. But God has not given him permission, so Noah sends out a raven. Now let's remember that the raven is an unclean animal. It's a scavenger. So unless God allowed it to reproduce while on the ark, this is a risky move. If it flies away and never comes back, then Noah would only have half of that pair of ravens. Unfortunately, it doesn't fly off and leave, but it does not come back inside. It just flies back and forth, to and fro between the ark and whatever else grabs its attention. A week later, day 271, Noah sends out a dove this time. Now, maybe Noah's heart skipped a beat as soon as he let the raven go last week, because he doesn't want a repeat of that episode of what if it doesn't come back? So he has 14 doves to choose from. And probably, there's a bit more significance to the dove being sent. And maybe we'll get into that in another episode. Regardless of the reason why, it flies off. It is gone long enough for Noah to conclude that it cannot find a resting place, so the waiting continues. Another week expires, and it's day 278. Noah sends out that dove again. It flew off and then came back. Now he sends it out again, knowing that it actually made the effort to search last time, right? And this time, pay dirt. The dove returns with an olive leaf in its beak. Somewhere in the mountains of Ararat, the right seed landed on the right soil, and a leaf has finally appeared. One leaf is not enough for Noah, so another week goes by. On day 285, the dove is sent out a third time, and it does not return this time. Obviously, it has found enough vegetation to start building a nest. Noah then waits 29 more days until the first day of the new year. And he removes the cover from the ark and looks for himself. And as far as he can tell, the land is dry. But God has not removed that door yet, that same door that God closed. So it must not be dry enough yet. On the 27th day of the second month, 56 days after Noah saw that the ground was dry, and 370 days since the flood started, more than a year later, the earth is completely dry. God then gives Noah these instructions: come out of the ark. And so it begins. All of Noah's family, all of the unclean animals, all of the clean animals, and all of those little creepy crawly things leave the ark. Now, the first thing Noah did was build an altar. And then he takes one of every kind of clean animal that he just spent a year with on the ark, one of each of them, and he sacrifices them as a burnt offering to God. Think about that. Hundreds, maybe thousands of burnt offerings to the Lord. Noah's name means rest. He was a righteous man. He was blameless among the people. He walked with God. There's only one other person in Scripture who walked with God, and his name was Enoch, and he was Noah's great-grandfather. And the life he lived was so admirable that God actually took him directly to heaven instead of letting him see death. That is the type of man that Noah was. He's the kind of man who did everything just as God commanded him. Now, was Noah's sacrifice for his own sin? No. The fact is that Noah has had a year to reflect on the enormity of what has just happened. Everyone he's ever met drowned. Every building that he ever saw is gone. Everything that he ever knew is washed away because of sin. Not Noah's sin. He was a righteous man who walked with God. No, the sin of the world and the magnitude of its consequences have been resonating with Noah for a year. So what does he do? After Noah exits the ark, he builds an altar, and then he sacrifices and sacrifices and sacrifices and sacrifices some more. I suppose it would be with tears rolling down his face. Noah knows that innocent blood is required to restore a relationship with God. And so with animals that he is taking care of for a year, animals that he knows and are part of his family, Noah sacrifices. And guess what? The Lord was pleased. Now, while the deaths of all of those animals were heartfelt, they could never result in the forgiveness of the sins of the world. The blood pouring down that altar could never be innocent enough to save mankind. The sacrifice could never be special enough to pay the debt for all of humanity. Only one man's death and blood and sacrifice could do all of those things. And that man, that's Jesus. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Stay tuned for the next one. Should be coming out in about a week or so. Give this video a like, subscribe, ring the bell so you'll be notified of the next video. Share this video, leave a comment. I do appreciate you watching to the end. My name is Bob Baulch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed.